Facebook and Twitter are looking to play a bigger role in the coverage of Canada's election debates. That's raising alarm bells for some experts who say these platforms can be easily manipulated to spread misinformation and to disrupt political campaigns. So, what does this mean for the next federal election coming up in 2019? Joining us from Ottawa this morning is Elizabeth Dubois. She's an assistant professor of communications at the University of Ottawa. Glad to have you here on this topic.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, what type of role are Facebook and Twitter looking to play in elections?
Yeah, so it's important to know that the conversations are still ongoing about what the next leaders' debates are going to look like in that upcoming election. Facebook and Twitter have both put forward requests to have things live streamed, to be involved in those leaders' debates, to try and arrange to have more engagement from the audiences that these social media companies grant access to. And they're also talking a lot about using insights, trying to use data about viewership and engagement during those leaders' debates through those social media platforms in order to guide coverage of the debates or choose questions.
In Twitter, also using the phrase, they want to be technologically neutral. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the idea of being technologically neutral, I think that was maybe actually Facebook that put that idea forward, is saying we need to be thinking about what we want our leaders' debates to look like for the long term. We want to come up with a flexible set of rules and guidelines, which means we can't say we want specifically to be using Facebook Live. Facebook Live might not exist by the time the next election runs round or the one after that. And so the idea there is we want to make sure that we are developing a set of rules that is going to be able to adapt to our changing media environment.
Well, you bring up rules and guidelines, so let's talk about those. I can think of a few problems with, private company like Facebook or Twitter being involved in an election campaign, and it centers around rules. They're not a broadcast entity, so they're not beholden to any of those strict guidelines, nor are they a news organization, so they're also not beholden to those guidelines. And when you do election coverage, there are specific questions that you have to ask. There are formats in terms of fairness and equal amounts of time for each of the leaders. As a private company, they wouldn't have to follow any of that.
That's true. We don't have guidelines that these companies are currently regulated by. We don't have the same sets of rules in place, but we are working on trying to develop them, or so the conversation goes. Hopefully that'll come forward. What we saw in the U.S. election was these companies pairing with traditional media outlets in order to have a little bit of balance. I think what we need to think about moving forward is how much ownership over these debates might these social media companies actually be allowed to have. I'd be really worried of a scenario where it is a Twitter debate or a Facebook debate rather than focusing on the debate itself. Once we start focusing on the company, then we run into a lot of these issues.
Facebook is talking about showing less news. They said that that's going to happen, but they do want in on political debate. So then how does that square up?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. And honestly, Facebook is in the process of trying to figure that out themselves. Facebook is reacting to the issues they're facing about Russian interference in the U.S. election, about misinformation spreading across their site, about people complaining that they're not able to have the social connections that they once had from Facebook and now are dealing with a news environment instead. And I don't think they know exactly how this is going to play out. It's also worth noting that the conversations about how these election debates are going to look started before Facebook announced their change to newsfeed, and we haven't heard from Facebook Canada how exactly those square.
On the journalism side, people take a look at that, them running less news, and say that has more to do with the fact that it's just not worth it for them anymore. Because of investigations like what's happening around Russia, because of their involvement in news has seemed almost like a bad PR campaign for them from the beginning. Could that be behind them pulling back on news and sharing that kind of information?
Yeah, we need to remember that these social media companies are driven by the bottom line. They are driven by profit. They want to make a product that is going to be useful to their users. They want to make a product that people are going to engage with, that advertisers can make money from, that they can make money from. And so if news content isn't getting them there, they're not going to prioritize it. It's also interesting to know that across Western democracies, social media sites are consistently some of the least trusted news sources. They make up a really important part of people's news diets, but they're not trusted, which means that people go and they verify information they see on social, or they use additional sources of information to confirm things. And so that, too, I think, could be playing into this decision that Facebook's brought forward.
Well, it is an interesting dilemma that, when you talk to people now, they say, I read it on Facebook. They don't name a network. They don't necessarily name a newspaper where that news source came from. And we know 51% of Canadians are using social media as a way to access news. So an interesting debate going forward, if that's the platform people want, but they're not beholden to the same guidelines of election coverage, how do they square that? I guess that's what they're trying to figure out right now.
Exactly. They're trying to sort out what that looks like. And the way social media companies work, the way Facebook works, is they experiment with their algorithms. They see how it works. They see how people respond, and then they tweak until they come up with something that works for their users. So I expect we're going to be seeing a lot of experimentation and changes moving forward. In the US, for example, they're experimenting with some local news tabs, so creating local news sections within the Facebook platform for people from particular cities. If that works well in those select US cities, we might see that move up to Canada, and it might again change the way people are interacting with news through Facebook.
Still such a huge gray area. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
My pleasure. Thank you.